Welcome to another edition of Community Chest. I'm Felix Milan, your host. Today, I'm very happy to have, as my guest, Steve Pickering, who is a candidate for Coos County Commissioner position number 2. Hi, Steve.
Hello,
Welcome to the show.
How you doing?
So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Steve, where you hail from and your hobbies and work experiences that people may not know about you.
Oh wow, that's a tough question. I'm kind of from all over. About a third of my life in the West, and about a third in the Southwest, and about a third in the Midwest. But I'm actually from an Oregon pioneer family. My mother was a Skinner, and I happen to be married to another pioneer family whose my wife's great-grandfather was one of the 16 original pioneers on Jesse Applegate's trailblazing expedition up from Fort Hall in Idaho, which we now call the Applegate Trail, which most of us still exist. So we're from a double pioneer family, but I was born in Michigan. My father had met Harry Leeton during the war. Harry's a local gentleman who had the snappy services all over the state of Oregon. There were 8 of them.
There was Snappy what?
Snappy Service is what they were called. Then it went to be T.J. Shaw's, and currently it is called Shark Bites. But that was originally one of the Snappy Services, and my dad and Harry back in 1946-47 had an enterprise up in Eugene where the first Snappy Service started. And Harry was a little worried my dad was going to marry his sister, and so he introduced my mom, who was a recent high school graduate, to my dad, and a short time later they were married, and some time later I ended up being born in Michigan and then brought back here to Oregon, where my mother was from. So I've been all over the country. I've spent time in big cities and small cities. It's about as small as they can get. A little place called Zone, Ohio at one time. And yet I've also lived 40 miles outside of Chicago. I've lived in the San Fernando Valley and places like Palmdale and Lancaster and Phoenix, places like that. And then out places like Maricopa. Here in Oregon, I've lived in Eugene and Albany and Portland and Springfield, Cottage Grove. I first came here in about 1966. I was dating my wife, my current wife, my last wife, and we were dating in 1966 and 67, and then towards her graduation day, actually in 67, we went our separate ways for family reasons. Her dad was a preacher, and I wasn't his first choice, and I ended up getting married the exact same day that my wife got married, and we moved down here to Coos Bay because I liked it so well, and my involvement again was because of my dating here. And we lived here for several years. In '73, I was one of the first firemen in the county to ever have any major injury. I lost part of my knee in an accident out at the Coosehead Pulp Mill fire, and or Coosehead Mill fire.
So that was an actual fire that you went on a call?
Yes, I was in the Charleston Fire Department.
I see.
And actually at the time I was attempting to become a police officer here in the city of North Bend, actually. I was driving a school bus and with a gentleman by the name of Bill Hewlin, who was a sergeant at the police department here. And Bill had talked me into becoming a police officer, and I was actually taking bar felony classes. That's burglary, arson, rape, and robbery, out at the old SWAC community college when it first started, from Tony Zarbano, who was the sheriff here at the time. And I heard the call on my portable radio and was the first one to arrive at the station. And because I was in the truck that went down to the mill, it was my duty to get the water started into the truck from a pump that blew up and shattered my knee. And so anyway, in '75 I left for some major surgery to save my leg, which I did, and went to Eugene and just never came back for many, many years. So I was here from 1969 until '75 here in Coos County, and I was very active at the time as a commercial fisherman, school bus driver. Active politically, and that was the time that School District 9 became the first school district who won the right in court to organize and potentially strike. which they in fact later did. In the 80s, there was a test case on that. And I was involved with some of the organization with that. So I've always been someone who volunteered to the community as a fireman. I was always participated with the other fishermen as a fisherman out of Charleston. I commercial fished for 4 years out there. Helped George Hartley start George's Marine Electronics, which is well known to anyone who has ever owned a commercial boat around here. George still exists, although sadly George passed away a few years back. And George was my mentor, who also got me into ham radio. And so I had quite a few ties to here. And then I left in '75.
So I just wanted to ask you, you said you're political, and I'm just wondering, why? Why do you want to be politically involved in this community?
Any community you go to, you're going to have a very small number of people who they don't just talk, they do. What they do may not please everybody, and what they say may not please everybody. But these are the people who are willing to step up, and it's not fun being a political candidate. It's not fun just being involved, even if you're not a candidate. People have opinions, and your opinions may not match with their opinions. And you suffer a lot of verbal abuse. You have a lot of cases where people just plain don't like you, and you have other cases where they think the sun rises and sets in you because you may agree with something that they particularly have in mind. I find myself trapped in that's why I said that. I don't consider myself a moderate. I'm a registered nonpartisan because independent is a party, and I didn't want to be part of a party. I want to go with what is right at any given time. An example would be, I'm not for LNG, but I'm for mining. I'm for the railroad. I totally support the railroad. I've got some really strong feelings on what the port is doing for the railroad, yet the Port Commission is not some of my favorite people. It's not that I'm conflicted, it's I try to choose the side that feels best to me to represent what other people want. And some people don't do well or don't want to challenge the people who govern them. I don't have an issue with that. I'll go toe-to-toe with anybody if I know it's right. I don't like getting involved if it's too far left or too far right, too extreme either way. But somebody has to step up and do it. If you've ever done volunteer work, there's always 200 volunteers with 10 who do all the work. Go into any corporation, there's always a large group who want to do things, but there's always a small group who do it. I like to believe that I'm in that small group, that I'm one of those people who will step forward and do the work that needs to get done. Although quite frankly, I got burned out on it after several years as a scoutmaster and in some church groups, various clubs and things that I've done over the years. And I finally said, you know, I'm doing all the work, or I'm with those who are doing all the work. And you can usually spot the people who end up doing that.
So being involved in the community to you is just something that feels right, and especially in politics.
Yeah, it's felt right to me since I was young.
Okay.
It's just something, I mean, I'm talking quite young. I became a scoutmaster at age 20 because that felt right